What's anime? I want to talk about the Kardashev scale as it pertains to the probability rather than possibility of us as a civilization um, potentially existing in a reality, speaking physically, that is vastly different than what's been represented to us. Um, Before I get into that, if you'd like to contribute to the channel and the research that I'm doing, experimentation, um, the PayPal is in the description of the video. It's also in the description of the channel. If you'd like to participate in any of the studies that I'm doing, if you'd like to give an interview, whether it be anonymous or on the record, doesn't have to be for a video or anything like that. If you have any suggestions, if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions on, you know, things that could possibly be good additions to theory research, or if you just want to say what's up or talk about something that you've seen on the channel, the email is gammaauobsidian at gmail.com, gammaauobsidian at gmail.com. Same thing for the Instagram. Not as active on Instagram as I have been in the past. Trying out Zoom. Speaking of which, I'm going to be doing a different type of presentation today. Hopefully it works out. I'm going to be sharing my screen. I'm going to be showing some visual representations of the things that I'm talking about to hopefully give you a better understanding of not just the things that I'm talking about, but that some of them are not impossible. We've been kind of led to believe that they're science fiction, but in reality, these things are, there's context, there's contextual evidence that maybe some of this has already happened, and I'm going to get into all that. So first thing I want to do is kind of set this up. So Nikolai Kardashev created his model to kind of explain his theory on what different levels of civilizations would look like. The reason that he did this is because he started out looking for signs of extraterrestrial life, using frequencies and using signatures, speaking astronomically. So he essentially was looking for anomalies that would explain or give the evidentiary potential for life to be elsewhere using signatures and frequency. And so I'm not sure if he ever found what he was looking for as far as the initial work went, meaning if he found a signature or if he found a frequency that did not match up. I do know that around the time of Tesla, there was a frequency that he said, that Tesla said he received, that is later supposed to be attached to the Black Knight satellite. I'm also going to do a video on the Black Knight satellite soon. If you haven't noticed, my videos, I touch on things that are not new topics necessarily. Some of them are, but what I try to do is add theory, because I feel like there aren't enough new theories being put out into the realm, into the ether. And I feel like that's a good way for us to figure out some things that are becoming more and more important to us as a society. Like, where are we? What are we? How long have we been here? Who else is here? Things of that nature. So Kardashev created a model that essentially separated these different levels of civilizations that he could potentially find while he was looking for this frequency or signature. So I'm going to share my screen. I want to show some different things, but the first thing I want to do is I want to go over the different levels of societies that Kardashev theorized. This is my second go around. I filmed this video last night, but the audio was garbage because I left my speaker on. So I'm gonna try to do a better job this time even. So type 1 civilization is capable of controlling the entire energy of this planet. And so the first thing I want to mention is that Earth, if you want to call it that, or, you know, Gaia, whatever you want to call this realm, is from a technical standpoint, regardless to the shape, it is not even a type 1 civilization on this model. The most current number I've been able to find, I believe, was 0.78 or 0.75, if I'm not mistaken. And that is because we can't utilize all of the energy that is available to us here. We're very primitive. I don't even think we're that high up, to be honest with you. If so, it's in secret. But again, that's the forward facing, the public facing face, facing face. The public facing persona of this realm would be that. It's not to say that that's what I believe to be the truth. I'll get into that as the presentation goes on, but essentially what a type 1 civilization denotes is being able to use all of the resources that would generate power and capability. And so seeing as though we haven't mastered or are not utilizing currently is, I guess, a better way to say it. The ether, there's you know, energy all around us. There are those that have proven that in the past. There are those that are experimenting with that currently with things like electroculture. There are remnants of buildings that show evidence of us using this in the past, like cathedrals. You know, many of the buildings that are left over that, you know, many theorize are associated with Tartaria. Not sure if that's the case, but they are old buildings. They did not come from the era that we are currently living in, meaning, you know, they were there before the 1800s. They were found. That's why, you know, they were called the founding fathers. Things are founded in kind of like, you know, it's the first buildings were found. And then since that point, creating or building a new building of a sort is founding something or founding a company. It doesn't match what it comes from at a, you know, speaking from an etymology standpoint, but, you know, you can kind of tell the difference between these buildings because many times the architecture is way more grandiose. It's way more structurally sound. The artistry is, you know, a few times better, and just overall you can see a difference in the way that the brain that created that building works as compared to the ones that you know, kind of work now. So yeah, we're under a type you know, 1 civilization right now. Type 2 civilization is capable of controlling the energy of its host star and travels through the solar system. So there's 2 aspects here. Some of the thoughts that I have on this are Kardashev's scale. You begin to see now that, you know, obviously it's 1964 when he's building this model. And so he is heavily relying on the theory of space. He's relying on the theory of space, and he's relying on everything attached to that unproven theory, from my opinion and many others' opinions. So with some of this, we're kind of just going to be going with what he's alleging here in the sake of utilizing the model. But to be clear, I don't give credence to the space model as it's being presented to us. If nothing else, because most of what we've been shown is not real. That's not real evidence. Meaning NASA and you know, space launches and things of that nature. Most of them don't make it out of the firmament. All, as far as I've been able to see myself, don't make it out of the firmament. And you know, when you look outside of the firmament with like a telescope or a good camera, what you actually see through those lenses does not match up with what you're being shown, with those CGI'd renders that NASA pays people to make. They have 2 people at least on staff. There's I don't think it's a documentary. I think it's just like a news. I think it was like a news report. That's public. It's on YouTube. You can find it. But they show the 2 guys that at that time, at least, that were creating the images and video that were being utilized by NASA to pass off their kind of fake version of what's above us. And there are also others that have like YouTube channels and shit. Some of them are kind of successful with it, but they also seem to create artificial renderings of things. They may, the thing that kind of bothers me about it, and I do want to look into this, is if you have a high-powered telescope, those beings seem to create photographs that show something. And, I'd very much like to be able to see that for myself versus just pictures, because I don't really trust pictures without more contextual evidence. As a matter of fact, there's one that I'll put in the community section of like an example. I think I've already shouted him out in my community section. His channel's cool, but I want to know more about his telescope, and I'd like to visit like an observatory or something like that where the equipment can be trusted to not be essentially like a telescope hooked up to a computer, because I don't know enough about programming or anything like that to trust that is not a telescope that renders a reading into a visual medium, meaning it reads, supposedly, quote unquote, this is what NASA does. It reads data and then uses that data to create a composite of what that data would look like. So it's not taking pictures, it's taking readings and then creating a picture that is based off of the data in that reading. That's not a picture. And for all we know, that's kind of false. And so I say all that to say the sun, utilizing the sun as a power source. It's not to say that that's impossible, because obviously we look up and see the sun. But based on this model, it's basically saying you would need to be able to travel to the sun and then create what's called a Dyson shell or a Dyson sphere around the sun. Within this, I'm going to kind of change some of the aspects of it just because, I can't help it, basically. So there are videos of people on planes that show the sun being a local body. So I'm not going to call it a celestial body in that sense, even though that's what it's referred to as. But it's something that I don't really like to argue with people about, because if there are videos of beings on planes and they see the sun go below the clouds, or they see clouds go behind the sun or behind the moon, that is, at the very least concerning for what we're all being told by those agencies that claim space travel, like NASA and other countries' space programs. So, I mean, honestly, that would make it kind of easier. You just have to build a Dyson shell, and it would probably need to be a bit smaller than you would think, because since within this theory, the sun is much smaller than it's purported to be, the Dyson shell wouldn't have to be as big. But a Dyson shell, I'm going to explain in a little bit. So the other aspect of type 2 is traveling through the solar system. This is another thing that is claimed by Earth, by the realm, to be already possible. They shoot satellites and telescopes. There's the James Webb telescope that's supposedly out in space. There are other satellites that are supposedly out in space, and there was the Hubble that was also supposedly out in space. The thing for me is that these are not proven things, and what we're shown, NASA has admitted those are not real pictures. Those are composites. Those are readings, supposedly. So currently, I don't believe that we are even traveling space. Obviously, we haven't built anything around the sun, so the first aspect is not achieved. But what I find interesting is that those in power in this realm would like us all to believe that there is an aspect of a type 2 civilization that we are capable of traveling the solar system. Not with organic beings. They're not saying that necessarily, although they're saying they want to go to Mars and all this bullshit. But we can't even get out of the firmament. And I say we, but I mean they. There are many, many videos of them attempting to get out of this place, seemingly in a frenzy. It seems like they're frantic to get the fuck out of here. Like they found some shit out and they're like, oh, we got to go. And that's happened more than a few times. I was telling Infinity Corridors about this in a session that we had in our group. You know, it seems like over and over again, they find something out during an operation like Operation Fishbowl came from them finding something in the ocean. And then they were like, immediately, they were like, we got to nuke the sky. They started shooting shit at the sky and trying to blow it up. They also bombed the ocean after some operations in the ocean. Same thing with Operation Looking Glass and Operation what's the other one? Operation well, anyway, it doesn't matter. There's been a bunch of examples of this. So I don't believe we have attained either one of these aspects of type 2, but they do want us to believe that. So type 3 is capable of controlling the energy at the scale of its entire host galaxy. Not going to really go into this one. Obviously, we're not doing that. And to take it a step further, these concepts like galaxy that's not proven. This is theory. This is theory based on things that NASA has kind of successfully programmed us all to believe. The concept of space and everything that's attached to it is taught to us in school very early. In fact, before school, there are videos that my kid watches now sometimes where they talk about space and planets and shit. It's indoctrination. We've been indoctrinated to believe in something that if you go back far enough, they started making movies about it for adults to kind of start that process. And then as moments passed, as quote unquote years passed and they, you know, continued with this indoctrination, it was added to, you know, school, you know, curriculum, and you're tested on it. It's beat into you essentially. So I get the aversion to the things that I say within my theories, but a lot of the time the pushback that I get is not due to actually knowing something different from what I'm saying. It's due to indoctrination. And I get it to a degree, because in the past, I don't though. I honestly, I understand why that happens, but once you get into a conversation like someone with someone like myself who can very calmly, not in a offensive way, show you that you don't actually have proof of these things that you believe, you've just been taught them over and over again, I would think that a level-headed person would be able to say, okay, well, yeah, you are right. I haven't seen space. I haven't, you know, it's just been in many different contexts, it's been kind of beat into you, you know, over and over again. So type 3, you know, that's whatever. So a type 4 civilization is capable of using energy at the scale of the universe. Once again, universe, galaxy, these are things that we don't know to be in existence in the way that they are claimed. Obviously, we exist in a sense. Obviously, we are in some place. And so the concept of a universe does make sense. But what I'm saying is that the mechanics of it, the way that it is told to you that it works, we don't know those things to be true. And so, you know, it also purports being able to manipulate space-time, which is, that comes from the theory of relativity, Einstein. Currently, physicists and theoretical physicists are talking about the problems with relativity. They're talking about the holes that are in relativity and the mathematics not adding up. Those that have built their careers on relativity are going through it right now because others are looking at these data sets and looking at these papers and seeing a whole lot of it's a whole lot of theory, and it's not even provable theory. It can't be shown with context. It can't be shown with math as it stands today. Meaning, I have my own thoughts on math, and others also have those thoughts where math is also incorrect. But that's a different video. In fact, look up Terrence Howard did a lecture at Oxford that I tell people about all the time. He has a theory for math. Others share this theory and are working on it currently and seem to be making a lot of progress. Check that out. Anyway, so space-time, what I will say, though, in kind of support of the model of space-time, not relativity, but space-time, and not gravity either, just space and time, is that when something comes into being, when something it reaches a dense enough state to be matter, it is existing, and as it continues to exist, those are increments of time. And so when I say I don't believe in time, I'm saying I don't believe in history for the most part. And also contextually age, when people celebrate birthdays and shit like that, it's because we're being attacked, pretty much constantly poisoned and all this shit. So these avatars were meant to last a lot longer. And so I have theories that I've kind of touched on a little bit. I may do videos on these aspects, such as the telomere caps that are shown by academia even to be attached to our DNA. They talk about junk DNA and shit like that. It's not junk DNA, just telomere caps are limiting our capability to access the rest of our DNA and its capabilities. So space and time, I support those because we can see evidence of those things. It's just not in the way that it's being shown to us. And I do believe that there is a sort of conspiracy attached to that in order to keep us in a sort of bound state where we don't know our true potential or capabilities, and we have a hard time figuring out that we are being physically limited on a genetic level. So a type 5 civilization is capable of using energy at the scale of the multiverse. In parentheses, travel to parallel universes and simulate universes. So here what I'll say is, as far as the concept of a multiverse goes, I've made jokes about the multiverse theory before, but it's because of this, and I don't think I've ever qualified this before, but I'll do so now. I think that the multiverse theory has been conflated with alternate or parallel universe theory. And to me, these things are different. A multiverse just means that there are multiple universes. And in a reality where the universe exists even in a way, in my opinion, that would mean that there could be probably other universes where I separate and disagree with theory that has to do with this is when people start to add the kind of Marvel shit to it. And I say Marvel, but it's really just like entertainment. Entertainment has everyone thinking that multiverse means parallel or alternate universe, because a multiverse just means that there are multiple universes, whereas parallel or alternate universe kind of signifies the probability of there being multiple versions of everything. So multiple versions of you, multiple versions of me, multiple versions of my kid, of the sun, of everything. And while I'm not trying to say that I know that to not be true, what I can say is it doesn't resonate with me. I don't feel any other versions of me out there. I don't have any memories or experiences with past lives or astral traveling to another version of me in an alternate or parallel universe. I don't have any of that shit. I know that some people say those things. It's been my position that many of those beings are looking for attention, or have some sort of other thing going on, some other agenda that they're trying to push or accomplish. For those beings that do have those experiences, there is also the you know, there's the probability of technologies that manipulate our experience in this realm. And this isn't theory, this is fact. Frequencies and other technologies are currently tested and being used to create different types of experiences. Some of them are dreamlike experiences, some of them are abduction-like experiences. And so the technologies that are utilized and public are different things. So what's utilized is far, far past what we are being told is available. It's the same concept as the military, where people say, oh, well, what we have is 50 years plus behind what the military actually has. And it probably goes deeper than that, to be honest. Once you start to look past just the public face of the military and you think of those that are below, the civilizations that are below, we're not aware of everything that is possible technologically. And so, you know, it's not to say that I don't respect the potential for a multiverse. I just make the distinction between multiverse and parallel or alternate universes. And so, you know, traveling to those is just, you know, I think that at the time that was theory for KARDASHEV. And when you see how religiously academia praised some of these scientists and theoretical physicists, you can kind of see how they would take theory and then just go with it as though it was fact. Theory of relativity. Nobody was really as quote unquote smart as Einstein in that sense. So they took his word and just it became law. And now we're seeing that was stupid. That was fucking dumb. And you know, same thing here with KARDASHEV's model. None of this shit is proven, but within these theories, I'm not sure if he came up with parallel or alternate universes himself or multiverses. That was potentially another scientist, but that's also not fucking proven. You know, none of these things are proven, but people speak to them as though they are these days still, you know. I could kind of understand at the time when it wasn't possible to get much information if you didn't go to a college. And even there, they're preaching. They're not teaching, they're preaching. So, but now things are different. We have the capability to communicate across long distances, access information in large volumes digitally. We shouldn't be stuck to these things like religions. And I've divorced myself from that, and I'm building my own theory through my own research and experimentation, you know, interviews, all that shit. And I think that everyone would do well to do the same, or find someone whose work they trust, you know, or not to say just one person, find as many beings whose work you trust as you can. Excuse me. So last one, type 6 civilization is one that exists beyond beyond time and space, or in higher dimensions. And so it creates and destroys multiverses. You know, we got into the realm of God, you know, God entities a long time ago. And I say that in quotes because essentially when you look at some of the capabilities that are being kind of proposed in these types of civilizations, if you were to show those things to a civilization like ours that is below even the first type of civilization, what would that look like to us? What would that look like to even beings from long ago? It would look like God shit, you know? So it's my belief, and I have a video talking about this in the playlist. It's the one on Ultraterrestrials. I have a whole theory, and I explain throughout different moments in time and culture how this would be, you know, the explanation. These beings that are very likely similar to us would just have way more advanced technology, and most likely they wouldn't have telomere caps on their DNA. Those are the two main differences that I see through my research so far. It's ongoing, but through my research so far, the telomere caps, for us to have 90 plus, you know, what they consider to be junk DNA, that doesn't exist. Nature, or you know, the first doesn't make things with junk. Do you see? The first does not make things that have extra shit that's not needed or usable. And so something or someone came along and limited our DNA, capped our DNA, like a governor on a car, right? And so those beings that don't have that governor, that don't have those telomere caps, would look to us like gods. They would look to us like gods or extraterrestrials, right? They would have capabilities that would seem just otherworldly, like magic. It would look like magic, or it would look like divine, you know, creation, divine. And these are just words that are preached to you. Speaking also in terms of extraterrestrials, all these things are preached to us, and they're indoctrinated and socially engineered through academia, the school system, and entertainment. Look how many alien movies there are. Look how many religious movies and texts and religions themselves there are. It's indoctrination. It allows you to see these things, but to not realize what they are for yourself. And so I want to go over some pictures of these different types of civilizations, what they could look like, and technologies. And then I'm going to go into a theory of why it's not just potential, but likely that we're looking at a situation where we could already be existing in something like this. You know, that's my thought, is that we could already be existing in something like this and just not, you know, not being told. So share my screen again. So the first thing I want to go into is the Dyson shell. There are different versions of Dyson shell, you know, theorized. I find these to be interesting because there are representations of a firmament that are very common in entertainment. I believe the Hunger Games, Chicken Little, King Kong all have these representations of a firmament that uses hexagonal like plaques of you know, some sort of material that's like holographic and reflective, but solid. And I find it to be interesting that the Dyson shell theory, some of those are made of hexagonal shapes. You know, the Dyson shell utilizes a framework and materials that can absorb the energy from a celestial body or a star. But interestingly, that's not the only application of the Dyson shell itself, just that iteration of it. And what I mean by that is you could create a Dyson shell for many purposes. For one, it doesn't just have to absorb light or plasma energy. It could also be designed to potentially and theoretically harness frequency, to harness materials like water, carbon, gases, other plasmas, rather than just like heat plasma or thermal plasma. And within that theory, you know, there's another version of the Dyson shell that I want to get into, but I'm going to get into that in a bit. So this is one iteration of a Dyson shell. Another representation, kind of similar, but one of the reasons that I wanted to use this one as an example is because if you notice, there's a lot more coverage on this Dyson shell, but light is still being released. And I think that one of the things that I came to as I was researching this was that there isn't, for a second, for like a split second, my brain was like, if you want to make sure that you're harnessing all of the energy possible, why wouldn't you just create a full-on 100% coverage shell? And then I realized, once I thought through it, rather than just having the idea, just like any other system of this type, where you're dealing with energy, where you're dealing with a fuel source of a sort, you would need to have an exhaust, because you could create a chain reaction or some sort of reaction that would be catastrophic for the mechanics, catastrophic for the device itself. And by that, I mean, you would want to let some of the plasma, some of the energy off gas or release, or it could create like an explosion or something thermal or something radioactive, depending on what you are surrounding with your Dyson shell. So this kind of shows the potential for maybe even having a Dyson shell that does completely encapsulate the celestial body or the planet or the asteroid or whatever it would be, but then sometimes kind of releases. If you notice, these hexagonal shapes are seemingly in a kind of configuration that could almost unlock or open, whether it stays that way or whether this is kind of in the process of off gassing, and then it goes back into a fully airtight configuration after off gassing. So I thought that was interesting. Another picture. I want to show a different iteration of Dyson shells. And so I've talked about Dyson shells that had concentric rings before. There are two different configurations of this that I've found. One of them seems to not be very, it seems to not be the best for utilizing all of the energy from a celestial body or star. So my thought would be that it's either just bad design, which is not generally a thing. As far as like, if you were to design something, you would want to go with the best iteration of it, the best version of it, so that you don't end up like, all right, well, now we got to update it, because this is something that would be very, very difficult to renovate or update. And so it's my thought that maybe there are other reasons for a Dyson shell to be utilized in this way, specifically because the rings are on the same radius. They're the same width, so they can't pass each other. And so you're losing a lot of the energy, a lot of the plasma or whatever you're trying to harness from the celestial body. But that's one iteration. Another iteration that makes more sense as far as like trying to harness is a Dyson shell where the rings are at different radiuses. They're at different widths. So like a gyroscope, they can pass each other. A lot like the gyroscopes. There's little toy gyroscopes. They also use them at NASA, supposedly for simulating zero G and shit. I don't know why they do that. They can't. Anyway, this would be very effective, but still release a lot of the energy. I'm not, a professional within the engineer side of things, so I'm not sure if it would need to be this way for some reason, rather than being a completely encapsulating structure. But it does seem like something that could be utilized for many different reasons. And again, I believe I'm going to get into that in a bit. I'm trying to go in a specific order, but just keep this in mind. Keep this framework, this iteration in mind, because I'm going to come back around to it, and maybe I'll show a picture again. But this is the concentric rings that are able to move in a gyroscope function that I mentioned before. And so so this is a similar one, similar function to the gyroscope one. But one of the things I noticed was that the celestial body, the star itself, had a different formulation around it. And I would think that this is in order to try to keep as much of the power absorbed as possible, but also to kind of keep the celestial body itself stable. If it were to suddenly move or go in a direction, what you see closest to it would keep it kind of in place theoretically. If you were able to build something like this, obviously it would be able to withstand the thermal and plasma energy that's coming from it. So I found that to be interesting. So let me see if there was another one that I wanted to use. This is my first time doing a presentation like this. Please bear with me. I appreciate it. Nope. So I'm going to talk for a minute, and then I'll go back to sharing some photos to give you know, reference to what I'm talking about. So some of the things that I'm noticing from this model, one thing is that within me talking about, I regularly talk about how we are indoctrinated and they use social engineering and psyops to kind of push our understanding of reality in a specific direction, right? And one of the ways that they do that is obviously through movies. I talk about it all the time, but something that has been noticed, not just by me, but something that has been noticed is Marvel specifically is almost kind of using Kardashev scale to progress their universe, the Marvel universe. So they started off with kind of being on world mainly and not having the capability of going anywhere, but there being, you know, superheroes with different backstories, but superheroes. And not to say that some of them didn't have off-world origins, but Earth as a realm did not have the capability to go anywhere else or do anything else as far as we knew. And this is going in the it's going in the chronology of like how it's being shown, because they do movies now that go backwards in time and show that this is how this agency was created and shit like that with the Marvels. So I mean, really, if you look at how the Marvel movies are being represented now, it's showing that they're utilizing Kardashev's scale to build onto the story. And this may go back to the comics. I read comics when I was a kid, but I never got that deep into it. And so I'm not sure if it's something where that comes from the comics or if it's rewrites, because rewrites would definitely explain why they are, you know, but it looks very much like Marvel talks about something and then you happen to see that in society or vice versa. Multiverse. They've been talking about multiverses a lot. And lo and behold, in theoretical physics, more publicly now, people are talking about multiverse theory. And what I mean by that is these topics are not new in physics or theoretical physics, but they are new for just, you know, the average person to be interested in. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, I think is the name of the movie. But these movies that are pushing this multiverse, there's the one with Jet Li. These movies that have been pushing this multiverse, there are multiple U's, you know, kind of misrepresentation, I would call it, because again, that's alternate universe, that's parallel universe. It's for a reason, it's for a purpose. It's to get you used to a concept for some reason. And I generally tend to think that there's a nefarious reason for that. It may be to kind of push the concept of a simulation being better than whatever this is, because this could also be a simulation, just maybe not digital, or it could be digital. But they are working on, you know, a simulation that they're claiming will be as good, if not better, than life as we know it. So in order to do that, it would be beneficial to ingratiate or indoctrinate you or socially engineer you to concepts that would be possible within a controlled environment. So I would not go into a simulation here of my own volition, because you don't know what you would end up in. They could say, oh, it's just like a cool place to hang out, it'll be like a video game, but then you get into this place and maybe they force you to, you just don't know. I won't go through all the possibilities, but that's one thing that I found to be interesting. And so in hopes of not going too far out of order, I'm going to go ahead and talk about one aspect that I found to be potentially possible and interesting as far as simulation theory goes. And then it might seem like I jerked to a different direction, but this is how I took my notes, so I'm just doing it. I had a conversation recently within the group I'm in that talked about the concept of the firmament being like sort of a tent or a two-way mirror, like like the police use, where it may be digital though, where they can engage and disengage it. And one of the things that kind of, there's a little bit of context for that is, not sure how often this has happened, but a while ago, I think 2019, 2020, there were a lot of reports of people looking up at the sky and seeing things that looked like stars, but they didn't, they weren't stationary. They moved as though they were, some sort of transporter vehicle, and they didn't blink like planes do. And they were also much, much higher than planes generally are. No red lights or anything like that. Sometimes it'd be multicolored, but they didn't blink. Some of them blinked, but then again, it wasn't in the patterns that airplanes blink in to let you know that it's a plane. So to me, that unless you have a telescope or unless you have a camera that allowed you to get closer up on those, which I didn't see any that had or thought to get their really, really good camera to see what those things were. My thought of what that could have potentially have been was like things outside of the firmament that were being seen because of something, whether it have been a malfunction in a firmament or a thinner level of gases that allow you to see more through it at night, whatever it might have been. It was a very specific amount of time where you looked up and just a lot, you saw a lot. It could have been some kind of project that was going on outside or at the very top of, maybe it was, fixing something. There's no telling, but those things are misrepresented by the powers that be and said to be other things, whether it be, oh, well, that's just satellites, whereas, and it could be satellites. I'm not saying that that's not possible. Satellites are hung on balloons, helium balloons, and that is how they would float, but they didn't blink. So generally that kind of made me a little skeptical. The fact that they didn't blink, the fact that they had lights on them at all. What does a satellite need a light on it for? It's not at the level of being hit by a plane, is it? Right? Is it at the level of where planes fly? And so that these things kind of led to me being skeptical of those things. And so I got into all this to kind of go into some theory that I have based on, within my simulation theory. A lot of my theory is simulation theory, but it's all encompassing. I'm trying to cover everything that I can. I won't call it a TOE, theory of everything, TOE, but I am trying to accomplish that. I'm just not, that's not my end goal. It's not what I want. It's not to say that I won't stop until I reach a theory of everything, because I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a physicist. I do kind of consider myself to be a theoretical physicist of sorts and a philosopher and whatnot, but definitely a researcher and a theoricist. So the reason that I bring this Kardashev scale up and these forms of technology is because the Dyson shell and the domed terrarium environment, these things kind of point to contextual evidence that I feel like I can see in our reality currently. And so to give you an idea of what I mean, let's go back to the pictures, right? So again, this is a form of a Dyson shell where the rings are concentric and they can move like a gyroscope, right? And so within that, there is the concept of Dyson shells or similar structures being created, not just for harnessing or utilizing energy, but within the theory that I'm currently working into, there's the concept of what some refer to as a ring world, but it's essentially just a Dyson shell that has been repurposed or created for a different purpose, in that rather than harnessing power, you create something like this. And there's a movie that kind of utilizes this theory called Elysium, where you can see kind of what is meant by that. And I don't think it's a Dyson shell specifically. If anything, I think it's an Alderson disc, if I'm not mistaken, or just a ring or maybe two rings. But I'll get into the Alderson disc in a second. But this shows the possibility for creating a Dyson shell where each ring is its own enclosed environment that's maybe even enclosed in a terrarium sense. As you can see there, it's got a firmament, it's got its own atmosphere, it's got quote unquote oceans, bodies of water, land. Would we know if this is where we were currently? Would you know? Do you know for sure? Or are you, is your brain immediately making you reference the things that you've been taught, that you've been indoctrinated with? Because as I have been building up my theory and doing research, the things that we think we know, we don't actually know. And I'm constantly reminding myself of this as I research, because I want my research to be as pure as possible. I want it to be as original and lacking in indoctrination as I can possibly make it. And so it's not me saying this is what we're on. It's not me saying that this is what I know to be true. What I'm saying is this is just as possible as the heliocentric model, or as a cube, or as, this could almost be considered the donut model in a sense, but we don't know what we're living on. We don't know what it looks like or how it functions in reality, because a lot of what we're told as far as how it functions is not true. Geology, when you go into the earth, we don't know about a crust or magma or any of that shit. All we know is that there are volcanoes and that there is soil and rock and metals when you go down, but we don't know that that's all the way through and through. We also don't know that there's a molten core. That's just what's claimed, and kind of you get beat over the head with that. But they don't know that to be true. They've only made it a very, very small distance into the earth when they drill or dig, and they admit this. So if you admit that you've only dug so far into the earth, how is it that you know that we have these different levels of, different levels of Earth, and then a molten core? That's all theory. And if you got someone that was, at the very least, they had integrity and scruples, that was a geologist or studied the Earth, if you ask them in that very specific way, do you know this to be true or is it theory? They would have to admit to you that that is theory. It's not fact. And so again, I think that there are different possibilities such as this one. Some other representations of that. My apologies, these are not in order at all. Uh, so, it's unless you are able to traverse the entirety of the realm freely, you would not know. And what I mean by that is, for instance, you can't go to Antarctica and go anywhere you want. In fact, it's heavily, heavily enforced that you can only go to a very small, specific area, and only one travel agent, one travel company can take you there. And I'm pretty sure it's government owned and operated. If you were to try to do your own independent tour or research of Antarctica, it's very likely that you would be detained, but possibly shot. This is heavily enforced. There's an entire treaty that many, many, many countries, many civilizations have signed, stating that no one is going to go to certain places in Antarctica. Now, why is that necessary? What's the reasoning for that? Because the reasoning that's given is dumb. It doesn't make any sense. They say it's in order to protect the environment. What does that even mean? If someone's going there and they have no intentions of doing anything to the environment or causing any issues, if they're not even doing experimentation or studies, they just want to walk around, how is that doing anything to the environment that's very, very harsh and capable of self-defense? It's freezing there, supposedly, right? It's just freezing there. There's nothing else there. So what is the purpose of having said treaty? Similarly, if you go to the Grand Canyon, you cannot go to many, many areas of the Grand Canyon. And it's been reported and kind of proven in many senses that there are aspects of ancient Kemet and Egyptian culture all over the place in the Grand Canyon and around the Grand Canyon. And there are areas that if you try to go to those areas or if you try to enter those places, again, you will at least be detained, if not shot. They will shoot you if you go to these places. What's so important about aspects of the Grand Canyon that you would need to shoot me if I go there, right? And to add to that, there is a theory that connects to Africa. There are places in Africa that if you go there, the locals will tell you. I've had someone who lives on the continent of Africa say there are places here that you cannot go. The army or the military or the government will kill you if you go there, and they're probably not detaining in Africa. They'll just fucking shoot you, right? Or worse. And there is worse than being shot. And so to connect those two things, the Grand Canyon and the continent of Africa, there is a theory that there's a place in the Grand Canyon that you can go where if you were to keep traversing, you were to keep walking, you would end up in Africa, which points to a totally different cosmology than what we've been indoctrinated with and beat over the head with our entire lives and beyond. And this would make sense at this point, that there are areas that lead to things and lead to places and lead to knowledge that is very, very much protected, and whoever doesn't want you to know these things, because it would destroy the model, the forced and agreed upon model that kind of keeps us chained to a lack of knowledge of ourselves and of this realm. And I think that these would be the steps that would take us to understanding these things better. And as a result of that, we would maybe have more power and capability and be able to start the process at the very least of, getting free, of freeing ourselves. Not to say that it would immediately free us, but we would definitely have more knowledge. And in my experience, knowledge leads to a chain reaction. The mental progress of one's consciousness does all kinds of things, both for said consciousness, but also for your genetics. When you start to get more intelligent, when you start to do more research, when you start to think for yourself, it does things for you subconsciously and consciously. And so, these places that we're not allowed to go to, for me, that's context that shows we could just as easily be on a place or in a place like this, these concentric rings, Not to say that they're, covered on one side like this, just using this as a model. And so within that theory, if we were to accept that we were on a place like this, let's see which one to use first. Let's use this one first. So we talk about a firmament pretty regularly, right? And so the concept that we are within an enclosed area, that would denote that there is more area outside of the enclosed area, correct? And from that, we are not aware of what is that area and what it encapsulates, what it has as far as cosmology, as far as geology, it's geography, like it's endless what could be outside of this enclosed terrarium. And so one formulation of my theory, and kind of the stronger one, lends to the concept of we as a civilization are in an enclosed environment. The possibility that that enclosed environment is surrounded by other enclosed environments and or outside space, free area, that would be extraterrestrial. So any beings that come here from outside of this terrarium would be considered extraterrestrials. Rather than saying coming from space or coming from, someplace up, it would look to us like they're coming from up, but it's much more likely that they're coming from below and just utilizing the same thing that we use when we travel by airplane. They're traveling through air. They're traveling through the atmosphere. They're not coming from, quote unquote, space necessarily. They're coming from either areas of this terrarium that we don't have access to, or they're coming from outside of the terrarium, but still on this plane that we exist on. And so think of the concept of there being multiple terrariums like that. Another example, if this were to be the case, you see how the dome is glowing and you can see from the outside. What if you cannot see from the inside and all they see is blue? What if all they see on the inside is blue, and that's the totality of what they think the entire universe is? Or maybe to make it more local, what if they believe that to be their planet, and outside of that planet they think there's just space and they can't actually go anywhere? Would they know the difference? If they weren't allowed to go to the edges of this realm that they're in, this enclosed realm, would they know the difference between it being a heliocentric model and something else, right? And so within that, even if we were to be in something like this, the concept of being able to see what is above you would kind of hinge on whoever manages or runs this sort of simulated enclosed space. It's not to say that simulation always means digital. That's not what that means. It's what's being kind of pushed right now. And it's not to say that that's not a possibility, but simulation just means not chaotic, not organic. So there are things that are being made to happen in specific ways. There are rules that are adhered to. There are things that are potentially kept from the participants, from the inhabitants of this enclosed space, right? And so what would you say if you looked up and you saw this? Very suddenly you saw a dome structure that looked like a window and had panes and had framework, and you saw outside and you saw all these things that we've been calling, galaxies and what planets and quote unquote stars and all that. It would give you a much different understanding of where you are within this quote universe, right? I just thought that this was a good representation and a really cool picture because it's incorporating what looks to be a real topography with digital rendering and representation of what we could look up and see if the truth, quote unquote, were to be unveiled. And so another representation Um, the concept of a floating city I found to be interesting. Not really going to go too deep into that, but same concept, but floating. You know, if something were to have happened, um, theoretically, and they didn't want everyone to panic, then you know you don't know what's going on even 50 miles from you. Not realistically. You could maybe look on the internet or you could call someone, but this level of separation, physical separation, creates the capability for the powers that be that are potentially utilizing technologies that we have no idea about. I think it's just as probable or possible that they could sort of create something like this, separate us from the catastrophe, or if they're running from something or someone, they could very easily do something like this within that theory. If there are technologies and things that we are not told about, it kind of leaves the probability and possibilities open, you know. And so I just thought that it was interesting to even include that as a potential, because we don't know what we're on. We just know what we're being told. Um, and so with the concept of you know, domes and enclosed spaces, it really would depend on the construction of this contraption, of this device that is you know, potentially protecting, but also holding, keeping the inhabitants in. It depends on how it works. If we were all to know of said dome and be told the truth and actively be working together in unity on such things, then it would feel much different. People wouldn't be calling this a prison planet. People wouldn't be calling this a zoo or a farm. But there are nefarious things that happen, and many feel like they're tortured. Many feel like they're targeted and attacked. And some, you know, it's much more apparent than others. Whether you point to life experiences and things that cannot be explained, or the more physical and material versions of beings that are abducted and experimented on physically, and given the narrative that it was done by some sort of extraterrestrial or alien, when in reality many of them do regressions and happen to see more like humans, and humans that are augmenting their appearance to look like aliens, and hearing you know, the beings that are standing around them as they're supposed to be unconscious, saying things like, we're going to wake them up, scare the shit out of them, and they'll think that this was aliens, easy peasy. You know, things like that are realities of some people's lives, of some beings' lives. And so there's a vast difference between, you know, a firmament and technologies and all these things existing and all of us knowing about it, between that and only some of us knowing about it and basically us being in the dark. There's a book series that I love called the Red Rising Saga, and there's a concept of this within that. Basically, your concept of reality is in a certain state, and then things happen that very quickly and drastically change your understanding of where you are in the quote universe, on your realm, and you know, so on and so on. Really good book series. I recommend it. I'm going to do videos on that once it's a very big saga. There's 6 books currently. There's soon going to be a 7th book. Lots of us hope that he keeps going with it, but he's already kind of said he's reaching the end of it. Hopefully, maybe he'll keep doing it and start something else. But I am going to do some videos on that. I just got to figure out how, because it's a vast universe of information, and there's many different ways to attack it from, such as this one. Another, or actually, let me get into this first. So the last thing I want to say, as far as the dome structures go, is that you know, you wouldn't know. Again, you don't know what you're existing on or in. You just know what you're being indoctrinated with. So this is another aspect or another iteration of what we could be, you know, potentially dealing with. And this one I found to be the most interesting because it incorporates many different aspects of my current theory work. and research. Not saying that this is my actual theory, just I'm researching into these different aspects because they're just as possible and probable. More so, actually, they're more probable and possible than the heliocentric model, which has not been proven, but is had some damage done to it by lying. NASA lies about these things, and so it makes us skeptical of anything else that they purport to be true, such as the heliocentric model and space. Not to say that space doesn't exist, but it definitely doesn't look good after NASA lies about it so much. You can look up in the sky and see shit, but we don't know what that is, right? So this representation shows a few different things. It shows the dome model. Once again, it's glowing blue. So can they see outside of that, or do they just see a sky? If you look closely, you can see that below that first level of the domed habitat, you can see below that there is another place. You see there in the middle, there's another place below that where likely other people are existing, other beings are existing. Now, you would think maybe that those beings that are on the top there are living a better existence because there's a sun and there's light and all that stuff, but that's just one iteration of what existence could be, right? We do know that beings have existed in underground civilizations for long periods of time sometimes, due to deluges, due to phoenix events and other, floods, local floods rather than deluges. All kinds of phenomena have happened that have driven civilizations and societies below ground for long periods of time sometimes. Some of them have not been seen again. So did they just disappear, or are they still down there, essentially thriving, right? Some of them are known as secret societies or civilizations. Some of them, we knew they went down there. I did a video on that called As Above, So Below, As Within, So Without. That talks about underground bases and civilizations as it pertains to my theory currently. Really, I'm proud of that video. It's a good one. Check it out. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because that second level there is darker, that it, for one, doesn't have its own light source. It could just be on the other side of this representation, this rendering. But also, you don't necessarily need that. There are many different light sources like crystals and things like that that could be utilized in other technologies that I'm not even aware of, that we're not aware of. So I found that to be another interesting aspect of it. Then there's a ring around the entire structure, and you could speculate what that ring represents in this rendering, but it could be many things. It could be a way to travel. It could be a way to keep this structure, quote unquote, afloat or balanced. There could be many reasons for it. But I found this one to be interesting because also there's the concept of an Alderson disk. And this isn't specifically an Alderson disk because an Alderson disk is a giant flat circle that would be used to house many different civilizations, and you would be able to use 100% of an Alderson disk. It's not something like this where that we have pictured here, where you would have to have some space in between for whatever reason, whether it be balance or whatever it is. But an Alderson disk is a flat plane, a circular flat plane, and this would probably make flat earthers happy, but it is also possible. So, I thought it interesting and I thought it important to share. But an Alderson disk is gigantic and utilizes a lot of space, both on the top and on the bottom. And it can be thousands, if not millions of miles thick, depending on how large it is. And this kind of lends to the KARDASHEV model, where depending on how far along the civilization in question has progressed, the Alderson disk would be able to be bigger and bigger. And so, within that aspect of delving into that as a theory, we could be on an Alderson disk now and just not know it. And there could be a bunch of terrariums close in proximity, right next to each other, far from each other. We don't know, because we don't know the creator of this realm, and we don't know the creator of that creator. We don't know any of these things. There's a lot that is claimed, and there's a lot that is just believed because it's preached. But I'm a proponent of trying to figure these things out ourselves with actual evidentiary proof. And so I like this representation a lot. I think that it lends a lot to the possibilities that we could be seeing here. And a lot of my theory hinges on the fact that we, in my opinion, and in the Bible's opinion, I'm not a Christian, but I find it interesting that it's in there, hinges upon the concept of a dome, of a firmament. And you can see the contextual evidence of a firmament above us. That's huge. That's one of the few things that we can say, oh, that's right there. I see that. And it does work in the way that it said, right? And so from that, there are a couple of things that I want to touch on that might not be in order, but they are important. So the local sun and moon, that points to this being much different than what we're told. It definitely degrades the story of there being space. Because if the sun is local, there are videos of people in airplanes that see the sun go below the clouds, or that see clouds go behind the sun or behind the moon. The moon seems to be plasma and glows sometimes so bright that it's, not necessarily easy to focus on. I remember a time when both of those objects were completely different. The moon did not glow in that way. In fact, I now find it to be very, very beautiful, the way that you could see the moon very clearly, but it wasn't glowing. It didn't glow. I can't really put it into better words than that. It didn't glow, but you could see it in the night sky. That was beautiful. Now we have this thing that glows so bright that it just looks fake, luminescent, holographic. There are videos of it being, traveled through by stuff. The daytime moon, which is another weird thing that started happening, looks a bit more like the moon that I remember. Doesn't glow, but you can see it. But it looked like that at night. And so these are things that point to a weird event potentially happening. Don't know when. All I know is when things got weird from my perspective. But I was a prisoner of war before that for 3 years. So sometime between 2014, I think, because I don't know that I was paying that much attention before that. I'll say, to take it back a bit more, I'll say sometime between 2013 and 2017, it is my thought that something potentially large scale happened either to me or to my surroundings that changed things greatly. But also, if this was a simulation, the way that computers work is updates, small updates, sometimes large updates that change the operation, the operating system, or certain programs. So that is also possible. That I find that to be good contextual evidence of the things that I'm researching, the theory that I'm building, the fact that the moon is different, the sun is different. I talked about that before. The sun, you used to be able to, in the summer, when the sun went down, you can go out, touch the ground, and it would have the thermal energy, the plasma energy still, radiating from and held within the ground, within the, more specifically, the pavement. Now, as soon as the sun goes down, it is significantly cooler outside. And if you touch the ground, no held plasma, no held energy or power. So that, to me, denotes a different thing. That's a different celestial body. They try to say things like, "Oh, well, it's burning at a different frequency now, and it's off-putting a different element now, and all this shit." And it's, to me, until you can prove those things in a at least believable way, I don't believe any of that. Representations of what I was talking about earlier, other than Red Rising, once again, check out that book saga, the Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown. There are shows on Apple Plus. I think it's funny that both of them are on Apple Plus. One's called Foundation. And going back to the theory that I mentioned, where beings that have reached these types of civilizations, meaning once they get to like third level, really, I mean, honestly, really, once they got to type 2, depending on how dumb the civilization that they travel to or that they visit are, how intelligent or how dumb they are, they would look like gods. And a representation of this is in the show Foundation on Apple Plus. There's very quickly, there's a scientist that is opposing a monarch, an interplanetary galactic monarch, and he's trying to get him to see that something bad is going to happen if they don't change their current setup. And they end up in kind of like this war scenario where the scientist has created almost like he's created his own civilization, but within that they created a religion to venerate him, and within that to bring people into the fold, to bring people into to be able to utilize their resources and planets and their people as potential military. They make him into a god figure, and they visit new planets, and they do missionary work. They do missionary work to try to bring these people into the fold. And so they use technologies that they make look like magic. They make it look like divine work, divine magic, and they give all of the veneration and credit to this scientist. So does that not sound potentially like what we have had happen here? Once again, within my ultra-terrestrial video, I talk about this. I talk about how this would work, the ins and outs, the mechanics of how this could work potentially, and I give my theory of how it did work here. And so Foundation is one aspect of that I thought was really cool. Silo is another show that's on Apple Plus that gives another version of what we could potentially be dealing with in our realm, where these beings live in a gigantic silo. So the silos that you see on farms that keep, feed or grain or corn, but much, much bigger and much, much taller, that is where society is. And within this, they are dealing with a situation where at some point, some kind of event happened, a catastrophic event. They all went into this silo, and it's been a long time. It's been a few hundred years that they've been in this silo. So it's now an enclosed habitat. They're not even really thinking about necessarily when they'll be able to get out, at least as a whole. In fact, it is against the law in this civilization, in this society, to say, I want to go outside. If you say, I want to go outside, they appease you in that, but it's forced. You now have to go outside and clean. So they give you like a kind of hazmat suit that doesn't really hold up, and you are to clean for as long as possible. They have this viewport that shows the outside, and the way that it's shown to them is this just desolate, no green, everything's dead and dusty and smoggy outside. But a conspiracy happens where one of them, says she wants to go outside because of something someone else told her. And you see this kind of conspiracy start to form. When she goes outside, they see a flash of something completely different. They see a flash of something completely different that is a different, vastly different representation of what they're being told is outside. And so it creates this possibility of like, oh, are you being truthful about what's out there, though? Could we potentially go out and not have to stay here? And, the show is going into that. So it's only got one season, but it's really good. I think it's based on a book series. So I would think that they're going to do more seasons of it, and probably Foundation also. But both of them are cool, and they're on Apple Plus. Plato's Cave, I've got a video about that. In the first version of this video, I went through and talked about Plato's Cave, but I'm not going to do that. This is a long enough video. It's a representation, it's an allegory of what this place is. And it's, Gnosticism and simulation theory are iterations of Plato's Cave. It's not to say that that is the only person or the first person who came up with simulation theory or that as a concept. It's just another allegory, another iteration of what some of us believe we are existing in. And Plato's Cave, to be more specific, kind of lends to the Gnostic viewpoint that we are being kept here, held here, like a zoo or a farm or a prison. And so within the concept of technologies that could potentially look to be metaphysical or divine would be reincarnation and avatars. it's my firm belief that this is not me. This is, not who I am. This is what I am driving. This is what I am inhabiting currently, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to inhabit this forever. Avatars expire for now. Obviously, there's a push to make new avatars that are different than this and last much longer. But I don't think I want that. In fact, I know I don't want that at all. I think it's weird and crazy to even entertain that as a possibility. But this is amazing technology. It's more so that I'm not happy with being poisoned pretty much 24/7 in 7 or 8 different ways at any time, and attacked by those that know more about this place and happen to manage it and run it, and so on and so forth. If it wasn't for those things, then this would be a great experience, I think. Without the nefariousness, without the maliciousness and malevolence, this would be, I think that that's what it was before, potentially. If you were to go with that version of the theory, that this was something much different before, and then something came here and took over and created what we're dealing with now, it would have been much better before. But there's also the theory that, we created this for ourselves to remind us of how things don't have to be so good. That's my Bliss video. If you haven't seen the Bliss video, watch that. That's a good one too. Just basically that things could be much better outside of this, and this is to remind us of that. That things don't have to be so good, and to help us remember to essentially be thankful for what we have and what we've created outside of this. Reincarnation could be different aspects of just consciousness transference, the capability to transfer consciousness from one avatar to another. And because it's potentially being done against our will, that would create trauma. That would create consciousness trauma, where you maybe have flashes of memory or whole memories of being in other iterations of your reincarnated self, your consciousness being in a different body, and you're being snatched and put back into new bodies over and over and over again. Again, there is the different theory that you are choosing to do this. I don't resonate with that. I don't feel like I would choose to do this over and over and over again, but some do, and some claim to have memories of this. They claim to have memories and experiences with past and parallel and alternate lives. That's good for them. I'm not trying to tell them what they have been through, but for me personally, I don't have any experiences or memories or any inclinations or reasons to believe that there are other iterations of me, or that I have lived past lives. It's just a part of theory. So if those beings were to be telling the truth, which I believe there are many that are not, then it's potentially due to the fact that you're being snatched over and over again when you die, because that's not a real thing. Death, I don't believe, is a real thing. If you are a sparked individual, if you are a being that was given a breath of life from the first, death is not a thing. And so that would be the reason that you would also see that being indoctrinated over and over again throughout your life cycle. And then snatched up and put back into a new avatar and made to do all of it over again with a wiped memory. Sometimes, if those beings are to be telling the truth, you may have some residuals. Technology is not always foolproof. It's not always 100%. So that could be possible. It's the way that beings say it and the way that they act many times that makes me think that they are potentially saying those things for attention or to push a specific agenda. The concept of time, again, history has been greatly manipulated. This is a cyclical place that goes through different events that reset things in different ways, or update and change things in different ways. Terraforming, deluges, Phoenix events, local resets, realm-wide resets. This indicates that we know zero about time as far as history goes. We know zero about that. For all we know, everything that we know as history was written 200, 250 years ago at max. Within my theory, that's just as possible as all of this being here for thousands or millions of years. In fact, there's more proof that we don't know that this has been here for thousands or millions of years, and that science and academia have just been pushing that narrative based on theory such as not such as, but theory much like relativity. Relativity was just accepted at the time because it sounded very smart, basically. Same thing for gravity. Same thing for space. There was enough context to accept it, but it wasn't understood by those that were accepting it. And it's the same thing here. Time and history are accepted because there's been enough, given to you to accept what you're being pushed to believe and to accept. But that doesn't mean that that is true. So same thing goes for time as it is applicable to history. So yeah, Phoenix events and resets have left us clueless. I'm going through my notes right now. What I can say, so the Kardashev scale, it's useful in building theories and understanding certain aspects of things that are pushed on us, and even things that are contextually possible or probable or even true. But it seems to me that we are pursuing a different scale. We're pursuing the levels of a different scale. There's a man named John Barrow who created the multidimensional mastery scale. And it looks very much like that is what we've been pursuing for a significant amount of time. On the level of, getting smaller versus getting larger is what Barrow looked at and saw as being advancements. And so basically looking on the cellular level, and then the molecular level, and then the atomic level, and then the nano level. And if you look throughout known and perpetuated history, not to say that all these things are true or factual or completely accurate, they've been doing those things for a significant amount of time. Cellular experimentation, molecular experimentation. I know for a fact that there is nano experimentation. All of these things have patents. All of them, they can show their proof with those things. And so within the concept of, some people call it clown world, some people call it the circus. Gnostics refer to it in different ways also. I believe that we're being shown the Kardashev scale. We're being shown the Kardashev scale in movies, in entertainment, in academia. Every aspect, even in the Bible, talks about the heavens above and whatnot. So we're being shown the Kardashev scale, but what is actually being pursued is the multidimensional mastery scale. That's what's actually being pursued. Micro-dimensional, not multi-dimensional. And they have made leaps into that. And from that, you could still see these different technologies come from reaching the levels of the micro-dimensional mastery scale. So once you hit, cellular, you can do experimentation there. You can modify different aspects of life, utilizing cellular experimentation and modulation and modification. Then you go a step below that and you hit molecules. You're messing with molecules now. You can create different chemicals. You can, essentially mess with genetics at this point, which we know that that's, being done currently. They don't do a lot of experimentation to a level of being sure of what they're doing, at least from what they show us. But I also believe there's a potential for that to be on purpose. And then also with, the atomic level, same thing there. The experimentation that's purported there has also been done. And there's been many things that have been done with the data from that experimentation. And then it reaches a nano level. And again, that's kind of more recent, at least as far as what we're being shown and told. Smart dust, nanotechnology, anthrobotics, these are realities. They're just being kind of misrepresented, and people are being gaslit because these things are being tested currently right now. And everyone's kind of being gaslit in one way or another. Some don't think that it's a real thing, even though they keep saying, we're doing this with nanobots, we're doing this with anthrobotics, we're doing this with experimenting with releasing these things from planes in the sky. They say these things, but then there are beings that are just so scared or in denial that they say, no, that's not true. When you tell them about it, they don't believe it, and they don't want to see your proof. That's the thing that gets to me, is that they don't want to see you show them that it's not you saying this, it's the companies and corporations that are actually developing and doing these things with technologies that are saying that it exists and that they're testing it and using it and what they plan to do with it. And so we are seeing a situation where we're being made to pushed to believe one scale is being pursued, but in reality, a different scale is being pursued. And I think that that has a lot to do with the circus, the entertainment that we are seeing. We're being told to believe in space and all these other aspects of the KARDASHEV scale, but that's not what it seems to be getting focused on. So I'm going to do another video on the microdimensional mastery scale soon, if not next. It might be, I think it's going to be the next full video. You know how my brain works. Some other like smaller videos might come in between, but that is what I'm going to be doing research on for the foreseeable. And so that video should be coming within the next week or so. I appreciate you hearing me out. Hopefully this was interesting and beneficial to you. And, once again, if you'd like to donate to my research, to my experimentation, the PayPal is in the description. I very much appreciate it. It helps me out a lot. A lot goes into this. I know it may not seem like it to some, but if you know what you're hearing, so much work I'm putting into this, and it means a lot to me. And I'm trying to build a company, one that does not lie to you, one that is working for us and trying to accomplish great things in reclaiming our divinity and reclaiming our reality and existence. And potentially, if I do find that this is some sort of simulation, it feels nefarious to me. So one of the kind of mission statements of this company is to get us back to where we are from. One thing I'll say before I go is that I just realized within the moment of saying it, I can't ignore the possibility that something potentially in the opposite direction, something bad could have happened out there. And within our hubris, what if we created this to try to escape that but not die? I think I'm gonna make another video about that. All right, dog. I'll let you know. Bye.